Texas A&M football has had a breakout season in 2025, and a big reason for that has been their defense. While they have a ton of great players, by far the best player on the roster is a defensive end by the name of Cashius Howell. Not only has he been insane for them, but at one point he was leading the country in sacks. Howell has a chance to be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, and also might help Texas A&M make a college football playoff appearance. But his story is pretty insane. He was a 3-star recruit who had no Power 4 offers coming out of Kansas City, and would have to enroll at Bowling Green. The Falcons were not known for winning football or producing big-time players, but Cashius became a really good player for them, transferred to A&M, and is now a superstar. In today's video, we're to talk about how all of that happened, and go through the insane rise of Cashius Howell. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the insane rise of Cashius Howell. Okay, so in order to understand how this happened, we first need to go back in time. Before Kelly Donahoe was the head coach at Rockhurst High School in Kansas City, he was on a rival sideline at Blue Springs High School. Even as an opponent scouting Rockhurst, the player who kept sticking out to him was Cashius Howell, who seemed to constantly disrupt what the offense was doing, no matter where the ball went. The film showed Howell affecting the play one way or another, whether you liked it or not. He was among a rare breed of high school players who played everywhere on the field. In fact, he played 4 different positions while he was in high school. Upon taking the job at Rockhurst, Donahoe said he came up with an idea for Howell to get on the field, as while he was a defensive end at the time, he could also block, and maybe he'd be difficult to tackle, so he'd play a little bit of running back. He said, quote, "We were sitting in there in the summer watching how quick and explosive he was, and we're like, my goodness, why don't we give this guy a chance to play tailback? We had a big old fullback, so we started giving Howell the ball in the summertime and realized we were onto something." But going back a bit to his sophomore year at Rockhurst, Howell had never played defensive end. He was a late bloomer who grew up playing running back and defensive back. But when his JV team lacked enough depth at the defensive end spot, he agreed to help fill the void. This move would help him go from a JV player to a Division I prospect. He said, quote, "My coach looked at me and was like, look, I need you to align right here, run around the big guy, and go get the quarterback." He said, okay, I can try this out. On the first play, he ended up having a strip sack fumble and a touchdown, and Cashius said, quote, "Is this really all you have to do?" Howell continued to make that transition look seamless, as he had 14 sacks as a junior, including 6 in one game. This ranks second in school history. Sadly, an ankle injury prevented him from playing a full season during his last year, but in one game during his senior season, he had gotten to the quarterback 5 times, and then had 2 touchdowns in the second half. You'd think he'd become a big-time recruit, but his coach said, quote, "Looking around to the local schools like Kansas, Missouri, and Kansas State, I felt he could have gone there and really helped them. For him to go to Bowling Green, I think they've got a guy that can play immediately for them." Yeah, he'd end up choosing Bowling Green, a lower-end program in the MAC. While he reportedly finished with 21 Division I offers, none came from a Power 4 team. Not only did Howell develop later, but also everything that happened in 2020 caused him to not be evaluated at camps, and then he missed multiple games his senior year with a shoulder injury. He drew offers from Cornell and Dartmouth, top FCS programs in North Dakota State, and teams like Bowling Green, Central Michigan, Ball State, and Akron. His high school coach said, quote, "He and his family went up there and liked it and felt comfortable. They've got quite a gem for sure." Howell himself said he fell behind in his recruitment, and that Bowling Green was the only school that was really recruiting him, and that's how he ended up there. He knew deep down he could play at the highest level, and he just didn't have the platform or the offers that he wanted, so he had a chip on his shoulder. One day he was going to make it big. For his entire varsity career, Cashius recorded 150 tackles while also having 21 sacks, 5 rushing touchdowns, and 2 passing touchdowns. Not being recruited by the local powers sort of killed him, as his coach said, quote, "Cashius was hurt on his recruiting that there were no Power 5s. I remember talking to Mizzou and Kansas about him, and they were really on the fence with him." Some didn't know if he would play defensive end or linebacker when he got to Bowling Green, but according to 24/7 Sports, Cashius was a 3-star recruit, the number 270 athlete, and the 2,162nd best player in the class of 2021. So, how'd he end up doing with the Falcons? Well, let's take a look. So when Cashius arrived at Bowling Green in 2021, they were coming off of a winless season. They did improve their win total all 3 years that he was there, as they went 4-8 in 2021, 6-7 in 2022, and 7-6 in 2023. They even won 6 of their last 7 games during the 2023 season, and Howell got better as each season progressed. In 2021, he had 6 tackles, and then as a sophomore in 2022, he had 22 tackles and 2 sacks. His best season at Bowling Green would be in 2023, as he had 27 tackles and 9.5 sacks, with one more forced fumble. This was a really good season for him, and one player said, quote, "When Cashius came in, you could tell he had some unique traits, something that not a lot of guys have. You could tell right away he was going to be something special, and it was kind of cool to see him develop into the player that he should be." In total, he would finish his Bowling Green career with 56 tackles, including 13 TFLs and 11.5 sacks in 30 games. 7 of those sacks came at the back end of the 2023 season against Akron, Kent State, and Toledo. But after the season was over, he would decide to enter the 2024 transfer portal and join guys like Jalen Husky, who ended up going to Maryland, and running back Tyron Keith, who ended up going to USF. He ended up becoming a 4-star transfer according to 24/7 Sports, and was the number 8 edge rusher and the 60th overall player in the 2024 portal. Howell said, quote, "When I first got into the portal, I blew up. A lot of big schools and a lot of SEC schools and different programs started hitting me up. I felt like with all the different information, the visits, and all that stuff, A&M was the best place for me." Mike Elko had said, "When you're in the portal recruiting, you have about 72 hours to build relationships, so any connection that you can create helps." Elko at one point was at Bowling Green, so there were some various connections on A&M's staff, and it would help him land in College Station. So how would he do there? Him spending 3 seasons at Bowling Green helped prepare him for the SEC, he said. He told himself it was not going to be easy to get on the field, as, quote, "You're not going to come here and go through the motions and expect to play. These are 4- and 5-star recruits, number 1 players in the class, and number 1 players overall. One thing I've learned is after getting a chance to experience what life was like at a group of 5, and then being able to come to a program like this that has endless resources. Last season, he was stuck behind players like Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner, but those guys would all eventually declare for the 2025 NFL Draft. During his first year, Cashius would end up having 40 total tackles with 7 pass deflections, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and an interception. Honestly, those numbers were pretty crazy for Cashius, and he was much better in the second half of the season, especially in their last games against Texas and in their bowl game against USC. He had his best performances there, as against the Trojans, he had 5 tackles, a sack, an interception, and a memorable deflection and diving grab. That would only be the start of the fireworks though, as the 2 Shamars and Nick Scorton both went to the 2025 NFL Draft, so now all of a sudden he was going to be the guy this year. He didn't have a lot of preseason hype, but he should have. Early on in 2025, Cashius proved he was legit, as in Week 2 against Utah State, he finished with 3 sacks. Not just 3 sacks in the day, but 3 in a row. He only played 29 snaps against the Aggies, but early in the second quarter, he had sacked Bryson Barnes on literally 3 straight plays. 3 plays, minus 21 yards. After the game was over, Howell said, quote, "The third one, I was like, man, if they pass it, who knows? I was just in a flow at that point." He ended up becoming the SEC Defensive Line Player of the Week, and people were starting to talk about him nationally as a 2026 draft prospect. He wasn't named to the preseason All-SEC team, but after a sack against Auburn and 2.5 against Mississippi State, he was now leading the country in sacks, and that chip on his shoulder had propelled him to new heights. Over the next couple of games, he then had a sack against Florida, and then most recently, he had 2 against number 20 LSU. On the season, Cashius already has 9.5 sacks and 16 in total, and he leads the SEC. Many would say it's the best competition in college football, so to lead the Southeastern Conference is a pretty big deal, and because of that, he's getting comparisons to a former Aggie legend in Von Miller. Howell said, quote, "Von Miller was a great player that came through here. It's obviously a blessing to be compared to someone that has done it at every level and is currently still in the league, thriving and doing his thing. It means a lot to be able to be in those same types of conversations as him." As I said, to repeat, on the season, Cashius has 14 total tackles, 9.5 sacks, and 3 total pass deflections. Currently, the Aggies are 7-0, and Cashius has a chance to get even more sacks and get after more quarterbacks. The Aggies are also currently in the college football playoff race, and they will need him this upcoming weekend against Mizzou, where he will try to terrorize true freshman quarterback Matt Zollers. But he needs to stay focused on this season, because after the season is over, he will likely be a first-round draft pick. I'm not an NFL scout by any means, but when you lead the SEC in sacks, you typically go day 1, and this is great for a player who not even ranked inside the top 2,000 players in the nation, and his best offer was Bowling Green. I'm honestly happy for Cashius, and hope you guys are too. But what do you guys think? If you're an A&M fan, what do you think of Cashius Howell, and who's another player I should spotlight in my next video? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you didn't support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.